The thing about genital preference discourse for me is that I don't necessarily think that having a preference in and of itself is transphobic, but I don't think I've ever seen anyone bring it up in a context where they weren't being shitty about trans women. Like, it always seems to be some cisgender sapphic who clearly still equates having a penis with being a man who feels the need to make their preference known, in like the comments of a trans woman just trying to live her life. So it's not even really a question for me of whether or not having a preference is transphobic, and more a question of why do you feel the need to bring that up on a public platform? Are you doing it in a way that's meant to foster an open and honest conversation about sexuality, or are you just trying to invalidate trans women? Because there is a difference, and we can tell.
Political lesbianism refers to the idea that women should reject sexual relationships with men and instead choose to form intimate and romantic relationships with other women as a political act. This is due to the view that heterosexuality is inescapably patriarchal and oppressive, and suggests lesbianism as a choice to best break free from male dominance. This concept centers around the belief that sexuality is a choice, and often positions actual sexual attraction by women for women as being derivative of male sexuality. Modern feminists disagree with the concept, as it argues that sexuality is a choice, lesbianism isn't innate, and that lesbians can be into men. Additionally, it politicizes homosexuality, and in doing so is quite often lesbophobic. While proponents of political lesbianism still exist and even spearhead feminist organizations today, many women prefer to simply be mindfully celibate, or female-centered, without denying the immutability of sexuality. What has become far more mainstream is the propagation of political bisexuality by liberal feminists, gender activists, and leftists as a whole.
Having a preference on what someone has downstairs is not and will never be transphobic. To tell someone they're against the community because they have a preference on what they're capable of finding sexually attractive is to discredit sexuality. We know that sexuality is more than just what you look at when you see a person. It's about what it makes you feel. You can't tell someone that they like Oreos just because you like Oreos. Are they tasty? And can you not fathom how someone else can't find them tasty? Sure, still not your right. To be transphobic is to have an aversion to someone because they are trans. Now, if you were to tell someone that they're not the gender they are because of what they have downstairs, that is transphobic. But you don't get to decide what people do and do not find attractive. My disclaimer is this. There are a lot of reasons to not date a trans person that is transphobic. There are a lot of reasons to not date a trans person that is not. The line needs to be drawn somewhere, but preference on what someone has downstairs is not it.
Political bisexuality refers to the concept that the only acceptable and bigoted sexuality is an attraction to both sexes. Often, it is not represented in this manner, but instead, it's rephrased in a way to seem progressive. For example, instead of saying that lesbians should be attracted to men, it is instead phrased as a need to unpack your genital preference, or if you only want to sleep with a woman with a vagina, you aren't a lesbian but a vagina fetishist.
Honestly, I think this comment right here just kind of shows like the stupidity of this whole genital preference argument. No one is asking you to go to therapy. And the idea that it's impossible to work on your own trauma without therapy is actually a classist idea in and of itself. It's also classist to put the onus on trans women that they must surgically alter their bodies so that you can find them dateable. Very strange. And another thing, just asking trans women what to do with your trauma. Why are you asking trans women? This is a question for yourself. This is a question for yourself. And I think that's another issue, again, with the general preferences conversation, is these conversations are just, like, again, not people's business in the sense that, why are you asking a trans woman, what do I do with my penis trauma? What is she supposed to say to that? And then when she gives you a response, it's the wrong one. So, were you looking for a right response, or were you just looking to argue with a trans woman? And I think if you're not ready to hear the harsh truths about how your trauma and how you deal with your trauma inherently affects other people, then don't bring it up on the internet, because it's just disgusting. Like, I don't want to hear about your trauma about penises, because I just don't. I don't relate. And as a victim of SA, I just find it so nasty how cis women, specifically cis white women, love to weaponize this argument against trans women for no reason. Like, no reason at all. You don't have to do this, and yet you choose to. Because why? I don't know. Because you have to center yourself in every single argument. Because you have to make sure you're the victim. Okay.
This, in turn, stems from the postmodernist view that reality is not a tangible thing, and that theory and spoken word matter far more than physicality or rationality. In other words, the nature of definitions being strict and unambiguous is exclusionary and therefore oppressive. Gender, therefore, is not the roles and attitudes ascribed to one because of their sex, but merely an idea that one can identify with as easily and arbitrarily as choosing a favorite color.
How are you accusing me, a lesbian, of being lesbophobic? The lesbian was too stunned to speak. We'll speak on this, however. You can have your genital preference if it's that important to you. All I'm saying is that you don't get to decide what other people identify as. That's it. You don't have to date them. They don't want to date you anyway, but you don't have to date them. You just don't get to play lesbian god and decide who can and can't be a lesbian. Don't date a woman with a penis. The rest of us will. Okay, good for you. Thanks for coming onto my page and telling me about your genital preference. I didn't fucking ask, but...
Part of this thought process might be buoyed by a lack of real-life experience, as despite consuming more pornography than ever, this generation has the least amount of sex, as is evident with the common suggestion that one does not have to interact with genitals to have sex. This in turn plays into the moralizing of sexuality. If having no boundaries is how to be open-minded, then sexual boundaries cannot exist. You can see that in BDSM, where it's almost a game to see how much abuse one can endure in the name of sexual open-mindedness. And you can certainly see it in the presentation of bisexuality as being the only moral sexuality. As per usual, this way of thought is primarily directed at lesbian and gay individuals, with the purpose of validating trans-identified men and women who wish to have their gender identity proven through intercourse by sex with same-sex attracted individuals.
They don't want to date you anyway, but you don't have to date them. You just don't get to play lesbian god and
One of the most pervasive and obvious root causes of lesbophobia is this idea that exclusive female homosexuality doesn't exist. It's not just sexual attraction to women that upsets people. It's the exclusion of men. It's the exclusion of males. That's what really, really upsets people about lesbians, to the point where they deny it exists. Many people, just think lesbians are women who haven't found the right man yet, who just need a good shag. The fact is, exclusive female homosexuality does exist. The word for those women is lesbian, and essentially what people like you are doing is forcing women back into the closet, pretending that there isn't such a thing as exclusive female homosexuality, and it's not called lesbianism.
This is another way of breaking down personal boundaries, by presenting sexuality as a method of attaining activism and proving allyship. Sexuality is not a performance or a choice. One cannot control who they are attracted to, and to imply otherwise is to implicitly support the same ideas used in homosexual conversion therapy. When people are told that not being attracted to a member of the opposite sex's genitals is being fetishist and closed-minded and in need of fixing after internal scrutiny, what they are really critiquing is the inability of their audience to continue the charade that sex is a social construct and not a material one. Those who push this rhetoric tend to be opposite-sex attracted, which are a majority in comparison to those who are same-sex attracted. Of course, because those who advocate for unpacking genital preferences claim to be part of the LGBT community, and because even a minority of them pretending to be a minority is enough to overshadow actual homosexual and bisexual people, they are able to push this on same-sex attracted people through social pressure. Being bisexual does not make someone morally better than those who aren't. Really, when it is presented this way, what is really being said is that everyone should be capable of heterosexual attraction and of fulfilling the validation requirements of others in the so-called community. It's not progressive, it's regressive. This, dear viewers, is where we part. I am very annoyed at this topic because it's constant, but it's Pride Month, and so of course people are talking about this again. And of course it's always centered around lesbians and gay men. It very rarely happens to include heterosexual people because, I mean, why bother? But I find this topic to be just baffling as to how anyone can argue that sex is not a real biological thing. Like, genitals don't have to be involved in sex. Have you had sex? If you think that you can have sex without genitals, I don't know what you're doing, but it's certainly, are you having like a mind bond? Are you melding like with Mr. Spock? Are you having some kind of internal thing that we don't know about yet? Because sex kind of includes touching genitals, but whatever. If you guys have any comments, questions, or concerns, please leave them down below, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.